Hey guys, so welcome to the Web Inspect Lab. This is gonna be very amazing. When we talk about web-based scanners, definitely Web Inspect is one of the leaders in the market. Uh, Probably around 10 years ago, if I remember well, it used to be a company called Spy Dynamics. Those were the creators of this tool, and it was acquired by HP. After that, it was called uh, 45 Web Inspect now. I mean, multiple names, but we all know it as Web Inspect. So we're gonna describe this amazing tool so that you guys can practice in the lab and you can do some, some scans. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is the interface. So we have here the front end of the web application, sorry, of the GUI. In the left side, we have the main menu. It's small application and pretty useful. So you will have like different types of scans. You can have like a guided scan, which means basically the tool is gonna guide you, is gonna help you like a wizard, so that you can, if you don't know too much what to do, it's gonna start recommending you and going step by step, taking you all the way until you are able to start doing the scan. The second one is the basic scan. Basic scan, we're gonna see an example. Basically, you just point to the specific URL and you start scanning. Web service scan, if you have web services, which is kind of a little bit different of a common web application. They use probably a SOAP protocol, so then it's also supported by Web Inspect. Also in the latest versions, you can support also mobile scans, which basically means Web Inspect is going to act as a mobile client, an Android or Apple iOS phone, in order to interact with the web application. Enterprise scans is kind of more broad approach. You can schedule scans there, but it's basically the same thing. You can generate reports, and obviously Smart Update is to find the latest patches or latest vulnerabilities being added to the product. So basically this is the main thing. And before going in those different sections, I'm gonna just mention here in the main menu of HP Web Inspect, you can see here two different menus. One is for the toolkits, which are basically many different tools that you can use along with this specific web scanner. Just to mention a few of them, these encoders, it's gonna help you to encode with different type of char sets, Chinese char sets, Japanese char sets, or you can use it to convert from base64 encoding, decoding. It's kind of a helpful tool. You have HTTP editor, which is basically you can manually send HTTP requests. We're gonna see an example of that. Macros, this is a very powerful one. We're gonna describe it in the next class, but basically it allows you to record all the steps that you're gonna touch in a specific application. If you remember Excel or Office macros, where you specifically tell the application what to do, it's exactly the same here. So you're gonna tell Web Inspect what is the specific section that is gonna crawl with that information. So it is pretty useful for you guys to just scan specific sections. But login macro is just for applications that you just wanna authenticate in an automated way. But you have also the workflow macro. It's similar to login macro, but with workflow macro, you are also, apart from putting the credentials to log in into the application, you can also say, okay, just go to these and these specific sections. It is pretty useful when, for example, you wanna test specific sections that has like a wizard, which is like a 3, 4, 5 steps that you need to fill out properly in order to scan the whole section. Keep in mind that the crawler, which is the feature used by these kind of web scanners, is gonna do its best effort in order to identify different sections, but by doing manually, we can specifically tell and help the scanner to reach some sections that are not going to be possible to reach in an automated way. Let's imagine, as I said, as a wizard, which has step 1, enter a credit card information, step 2, put your specific dates or put a specific field, and if you don't put like a specific field like a phone number, an email address, then it won't be able to move to the next step. And if that happens, then the scanner is not going to be able to test that specific wizard, and therefore we can miss specific vulnerabilities. So we're going to see an example of those things. And I mean, there are many other tools like SQL Injector, which basically is just to inject manual SQL or automate it. It has also Server Analyzer, so that you can know what is the type of server that you are dealing with. It's like a fingerprinting. SWF Scan, which is a free tool so that you can analyze flash files. WebBrute, if you remember in other classes, we use Hydra in order to brute force login forms, which is exactly the same here. You can do that here. I'm gonna just open this quickly so that you can see how it works. The intention is not to go through it, but feel free to play with it in the lab. It's pretty easy to use those tools. And this specific one, as I said, is just a brute forcer. Basically, you are gonna say, okay, here's my login form, and use a dictionary-based attack. Web Inspect comes with predefined dictionaries, but you can always choose your own. For this specific demo, we're gonna be using a website from HP, which is called ZeroWebAppSecurity.com. It is a predefined vulnerable website created by HP, and I mean, we can use it for the purpose of describing how the tool works. So if we go to this tool, we can say, okay, let's enter that specific URL. Let's copy paste this one. For example, here you can say, okay, here is my URL, and then you click next, and what is going to happen is that it is going to try to identify the login form. You can say here that the authentication is a web form, which is a traditional input login with username and password. The traditional web form, in this case, sorry, but as you can see, it can be something different. In this case, it's gonna open. The tool is gonna try to browse into that specific web application, as you can see here, and it's gonna connect to that web application. And then if we go to the login form, in this case inside sign in, you can see that right away the tool identify the web form, identify the user password and the user login. Here you can say, okay, select user login, and you choose a specific default dictionary based, in this case username list, and you can also select the same for the password, and you can select the other dictionary, or you can create your own, right? That's the way it works. And finally, once you identify the web form, you can just do brute, and it's gonna start, trying many different passwords and hopefully find the right combination. That's, as I said, pretty simple tool, but those tools are pretty simple to use. Coming back to the menu, we have other tools, as I said. Feel free to play with them. We have this web proxy, which basically is a proxy like Burp or like Zap from OWASP, which is going to allow you to intercept requests and responses. And you have the macro recorder, and that's pretty much it. So let's come back to our scanner. So once we are here, and before starting, I'm just gonna quickly show you some of the configurations about this web scan. You go to default scan settings, and here you will have all the default options, and obviously you can change it if you want with whatever it is your needs. So for example, here is, as you can see, many different options. I'm just gonna go quickly through all of them. Some of them are pretty easy to understand. Here in the scan settings, you have like four modes. Crawl only means that the scanner is just gonna list all the different resources of that specific web server, web application, which is basically directories and files, the resources in that specific application. Crawl and audit means it's gonna crawl, but at the same time it's gonna test. It's gonna send multiple tests in order to find vulnerabilities. Audit only means don't do crawl. Basically, this option is when you have a macro that is gonna tell the web scanner what are the different sections, and audit means just go to those sections, those URLs, and just start attacking it. Or manual, which means you are gonna manually tell what is the different sections that you wanna the scanner to run against. We will leave it in the default one. You can always change it, and you can do the simultaneously or sequential. Basically, if you wanna do crawl and audit simultaneously, or if you wanna do it sequentially, and crawl and audit details, include the search proofs, crawl links on file not found responses, like if you wanna follow them or not, autofill web forms during crawl. This is pretty useful, so that if the scanner finds some forms, web forms, it will inject automatically information in those web forms in order to try to fulfill the requirement and move forward to the next step. Like, let's say that form is just to add a contact, it will try to do it in order to execute properly that specific request, and then try to test if there are vulnerabilities. The way the scanner works is that once it finds a specific request which was a successful one, after that it will start injecting its own vulnerabilities in order to find issues. Okay, so interactive mode, that's pretty cool. Basically, the scanner, as soon as it finds a web form, is going to stop and it's going to wait for you to include any information into that specific web form. That's useful for specific scenarios, because keep in mind that if you are scanning a really big application which has dozens of web forms, it's not practical to stop it every time, and the scan can take 2, 3, 4 hours and you cannot be in front of the computer probably just waiting for the next web form for you to fill it out. So there are other approaches like web macros that I'm going to describe in another class, in the next class actually. So these are the different protocols supported, and then you go to general option, which has some scan details, enable pattern truncation, case sensitive request and response handling, compressed response data. All those different informations are configurations are by default. You should not need to change anything. Enable traffic monitor logging. That means it is performance consuming, but basically what you are doing is every single request and response is going to be stored in a file. It's going to enable a proxy, but it's obviously it's going to hit the performance. So it's not recommended unless you want to debug in a specific section. And here, as you can see, limit the maximum single URL hits to 5, parameters in the hit count, link traversal sequence, like you can traverse different sequence up to 15, or you can go in depth into the folders, subsections, also to 15 subfolders, and different options. Content analyzer, if you find flash, you are able to analyze it, it's supported, and there are many different other things, like allow host, for example. If, for example, the scanner is trying to, you're scanning a specific web application and that application is trying to connect to a different domain, you can say here don't allow it or allow it. HTTP parsing, if you want to try to identify ASP.NET or any other information within the website, you can add whatever you want to match to determine, for example, here the state, right? If you find ASP.NET, so that means that you might find a specific cookie, so that you can always put your regular expression in order to match that specific cookie, like in this case JSession ID, so that you can know if you match that specific session related information. Custom parameters, you can put specific parameters if you wanna web inspect as soon as it, so that specific parameter is gonna use it. I mean, there are many different options here, guys. Feel free to play with it. The proxy, authentication, it can be automatic, can be basic, HTTP basic, NTLM for Windows based, Kerberos, site authentication. This is the login macro that I just described. We're gonna see an exercise about it. File not found, how you can match it. The policy, this is pretty cool. Basically, the policy is all the different vulnerabilities that Web Inspect is aware of are here. You can see that it has like a best practices, top 10 OWASP. It has the standard one, but it has many other ones, right? You can see here that it has like aggressive SQL injection, which means only test related to SQL injection, all checks, Apache struts, blank, nothing. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Cross-site scripting, only test related to critical or highest vulnerabilities like SQL injection, local file inclusion, mobile, if it is just for cell phones. And as you can see, there are multiple different set of policies. But what it is pretty cool here is that you can create your own. Because let's imagine that you have an application which it is Apache PHP MySQL, right? And the policy will have different tests for IIS or for Netscape or for Nginx, for different other web servers and different other databases. So doesn't make any sense for you to let Web Inspect to use all that kind of sets, because it is like thousands of tests, which is going to slow down the test. The scan can take hours. But if you create your own policy for that specific web application, it's going to speed up dramatically. So we encourage you to create your own policies. Let's see an example here. I click on create, and here in the policy manager, we're going to start seeing all the different policies, and they are separated by type: authentication, authorization, client-side attacks, and you can see that inside all of them are different tests. Let's see authentication. Okay, in authentication, you can see that we have brute force attacks, and here is what I was describing before. You can see that we have IIS web server, we have SMTP web applications, we have in this case different email servers. When you click on any of those, you can see the description, you can see links, you can see how it works, all the details about that specific vulnerability. But in this case, like for example, it is like multiple mail servers. So if you don't have these mail servers, doesn't make any sense for you to enable it. The way you disable it is just by unchecking those different boxes, as you can see here. So you can do that, and then you can move like for the next one, right? Like let's say insufficient authentication. Let's say that you don't want IIS. Okay, you remove everything about IIS, right? Or let's say that you also don't want Sandbar in a specific application. So you just uncheck all of them. It is kind of hard, not hard, sorry, time consuming, but eventually, once you are done removing and just leaving the ones that you know it is affecting your web application, the scan time is going to be improved dramatically. Once you have all the selected ones, you just say here save, and you will say like my CSTT policy, let's say as an example, right? You have your policy ready for that specific application, and that's pretty much it. We're gonna see how you can select them later. Here in custom, you can see we have our own policy that we just created. With that policy in mind, we're gonna describe some examples later. And well, there are other information here, but it's pretty easy. Smart Scan is gonna allow you to detect specific applications. Like if you click here in add, you can say, okay, I have this specific web server or application, and you can help Web Inspect to detect specific application types. That's pretty much it here. You can save always your settings if you want. And let's move to the basic scan. Once we click in the start a basic scan, you need to put here the scan name. Let's say CSTT1 or whatever. We are gonna say that we want crawl and audit because we want Web Inspect to do a crawl and audit, right? And we put our URL, initial URL, and then here you can even say list driven scan, which means you can put a set of different list of URLs coming from a TXT file or XML, or you can also say use a macro. We're gonna talk about that in the next class, but in this case let's just go to the standard one, just run, which is not recommended, guys, because keep in mind that when you want to scan an application thoroughly, you need to first of all understand it. Because of the threat modeling effort, we invite you to take that class if you want it, so that you can understand the inputs of that application, and you can be able to thoroughly understand what needs to be tested. And therefore, it's not recommended to just tell Web Inspect go and try to grab whatever you can find. You're gonna miss the most important vulnerabilities. But for the reason of explaining you, let's go to the standard scan. Here in the start, we say the URL, we click next. The network proxy, if we have a proxy, it can just read whatever it is in Internet Explorer. Site authentication, as I said before, if you want to put some, if your website has a login page, you can record here a macro, and the web scanner, as soon as it sees that web form, is going to use the macro to authenticate. It's not the case, so we're going to leave it, but it is important for you to keep in mind. Here the coverage is normally the default one. You can obviously go a little bit moderate, or something quick, or something which is the default crowd coverage. Or you can go thorough, which is gonna take more time, but again, my recommendation is don't go with that. Create your own macros if it is a small application, and if it is really big, definitely do a crawl, but in combination with a macro to also touch on specific sections that cannot be reached directly by the automated crawler. The audit depth policy, as you remember, we can even use our own policy that we created, or the default ones. Highly recommended to create your own policies. Step 4 out of 5, we are very close to finish it. Here is the profiling side. Basically what it is doing, it is sending some requests to the web application so that Web Inspect can understand and fingerprint the web application. It will realize, okay, this looks like an Apache with a MySQL and PHP, whatever it is, and it is very important so that the Web Inspect is going to propose some configuration based on the profiling. As you can see here, it says running analyzer. It is trying to to do some checks. I'm just gonna abort it so that we don't take too much time, but it's recommended to leave it. As I said, you can use here to autofill web forms, but you can always create your own fields. Let me give you an example. All those fields that you can see here, as soon as WebInspect see this field name, which is related to a web form, it will use the value mentioned here. Like for example here, access, if it sees that there is an input field with the name access, it will put either 334 or this value, right? Or for address, it's gonna put this value. So let's check here that in our sign in page, right? So let's see that if we go there, we have our login page, and the login page has a login and password. If we check the source code, so the source HTML of this specific login form, let's go to login. You can see that there is a user login name of the input text, right? And also the password, which is here. So this is exactly the field that I'm referring in the other window. As soon as it sees these names, if we put it in that window, it will put the content that we want. So let's say that we want, let's just edit this one, click on modify. So we put here the name, it's gonna be user login, let's say 9 characters, and we put like whatever, right? So every time WebInspect sees this input text with the name user login, we'll put this specific information. Why is this useful? Because of these guys. Like, this is a card number, right? Credit card, and has a specific format. So that's pretty useful because you can tell WebInspect the specific format of the input in order to be able to properly execute that specific form. Keep in mind that in some cases, as said before, there are multiple steps, web forms, that if you don't pass the first step, you are not going to be able to reach the other sections. Okay. Allowed hosts, as I said, all the hosts allowed to be scanned. This feature is not very common to be used, but you can always import false positives from other scanners, from other scans, so that WebInspect knows about those and doesn't do the same mistakes again. Traffic analysis basically is going to monitor all the HTTP requests and responses are going to be stored, but it is a lot of information and it's going to slow down more your scanner, so it's not recommended unless you are debugging something. And finally, you're ready to save your scan settings, and if you click here in scan, we're going to see that the scan is going to start running. I'm not going to run it right now because we're going to see many examples in the future, but this is basically the basic scan for WebInspect. Here in this side, you can see in the recently open scans, you will have a list of all your scans that has been run. You have scheduled scans also. You can say run the scan tomorrow, whatever you want. And you have basically all the information that you need here, guys. So that is all about WebInspect configuration. Okay guys, so let's continue. Now, as I mentioned before, one of the amazing features from WebInspect is the ability to record macros, web macros, so that you can go to specific sections that probably cannot be reachable by an automated scanner. So there are a couple of macros in Web Inspect. One of them is, as I said before, the login macro recorder. Let's see how that works. So we open the macro recorder, and basically what we're gonna do is this, guys. We know that we have this login page, right? And this is very important. When you are doing a web scan against an application, there are two approaches. One approach is the black box one, where you don't know the credentials, right? And you will do your best to find vulnerabilities in order to bypass the authentication, which is fine. But also, after that, there must be another scan with valid credentials. And the reason is because whether you were able to bypass the login form or not during your black box approach, you also need to test application with a valid user. What that means is you are testing the application with a user in order to know if something wrong or some vulnerabilities can be found during a session for that specific user. Even if you have multiple profiles, multiple roles in your organization, which means they might have different menus, different sections within their own profiles, you must use all those different credentials so that you can also test all in order to identify vulnerabilities in those profiles. Keep that in mind. It's not like, okay, so it is black box, I don't know anything, and don't give me any credentials. That's fine in the first phase, but you also need to need to test for vulnerabilities in authenticated sessions. Okay, so in this case, we know that we have the username and password, right? So we want the scanner to log in and then keep scanning. Just log in. We're gonna help him to log in by creating this macro, and then just move on. So in order to do that, we're gonna come to the login, and then we say, okay, so we move to this specific page. Let's copy paste here. So we just put here, and as you can see, this web macro recorder has its own built-in engine. So as you can see here, it can render Firefox, which is like rendering Firefox browser, but you can also choose Internet Explorer if you want, or different user agents for mobile. We recommend for Web Inspect Firefox because Firefox is also used for this specific tool in order to create the macros. In other words, it is more transparent for this tool when it is rendered in Firefox because it knows the APIs and all the design was based on this browser. So once we are here, we're gonna say, okay, record. That means it's gonna start recording whatever we do. You can see here it says navigate to this website. From here we say click on sign in, and you can see we go to the sign in, and at the same time the macro is saying I click on sign in. The next step is we fill it out with the valid credentials and click in sign in, and you can see that in the left side it is doing exactly the same. For example, here in the sign in, you can see it says click on login, type username, type the password, and click in sign in. Exactly what we are doing, right? And that's pretty much it for the login, because we are already authenticated. We say stop. Okay, the next step is Web Inspect is going to tell you replay the macro so that we can see if it is working as expected. So we just click on play and see what's going to happen. Web Inspect is going to go follow the steps, go to the login, put the username, put the password, click in sign in, and then is gonna get in. Sometimes, believe me guys, it is picky, it is not buggy, but depending on the application, sometimes it's not able to replicate it, so you need to find ways to do it. But as you can see, it is highly configurable. You can click on any step, go inside and say no, I don't want to click, I want double click, I want drag, I want get property. I mean, you can change anything, or even you can delete a specific step, right? Like this, you can say, you know what, I don't want this one, just delete it or disable it. So it is highly configurable. So as we saw, the macro played properly, so we say yes, it works properly. And then the next step is that WebInspect recommends that is useful to know a page, authenticated page, so that WebInspect can confirm when it was successfully authenticated. It is just recommended, it is not mandatory, but we always take it. So we're going to say yes, we're going to tell you a valid page, and then it says okay, highlight it. We highlight, like, let's say cash accounts. We know that as soon as you authenticate, the cash accounts information is going to be listed, so we say use this as a validator that you have been successfully authenticated. And it says okay, fine, let's play it again. So it's gonna again go to sign in, put the username, put the password, click on sign in, get inside, validate that it is a cash count, and then it says good to go. We say yeah, it's good. And then check this out. WebInspect is gonna try to detect a logout condition. 90% of the time it's gonna find it, and the reason is because most of the time when you are logged out, you get a redirection into the login page, right? So as you can see, it says the macro detected a valid logout condition, so the macro is complete. If you want to see the condition, you can go to logout conditions, and you can see that it detected a 302, which is a redirection instruction in the HTTP header in order to go to the location login. As I said, it's basically saying I detected that there is an option where if you click on logout, it's gonna go to login page. And the reason he wants to know that is because if during the scan, for some reason, the application gets disconnected or logged out, it's gonna call the login macro right away in order to log in again and keep scanning. That's the only reason. Okay guys, so here we can just say save, right? Because we want to save our login macro. And then we can say here, let's just replace with this one, login macro. We say yes, replace it, yes, and we have our login macro, guys. Okay, that's pretty much it. And just keep in mind that it is highly configurable, and sometimes it's a challenge because sometimes it's not easy to replicate. Now that we have our login macro, let's try to run a scan and see how it works. So we're gonna say start a basic scan. In this case, we're gonna say audit only. We're gonna say crawl and audit, yeah, so that it can crawl and audit, but we're gonna say later on site authentication. And here we can click on record to record a login macro, but we already created ours, right? So we just go and say use our login macro. So basically what is going to happen is WebInspect is going to start running, and then when it detects a specific web login form that matches the one with the fields in our macro, it will use it. Here we're going to put, just so that it can be quick, cross-site scripting, just to check for cross-site scripting. We click next. We kind of abort the profiling so that it can be kind of quick. We already explained all these different options. We click next, and then we click scan. Okay, so then right now what's going to happen is WebInspect is going to start running a scan against that specific website, and as soon as it finds the login form, is supposed to use the macro, guys, and is supposed to be able to authenticate. The reason we know it is working fine is because we should see the internal sections after authentication. In other words, if we come here and we get to username and password, right? If we enter it, once we are inside, we can see different links, right? Let me just click on continue. Oh, I put the wrong password. Username, password. Okay. So here you can see that we have different links, right? Like account summary, we have account activity, right? We have transfer funds. So those different sections might be reachable now by the scanner. Something pretty interesting here is that, and as I was saying the other day, if you want to do pay bills, for example, or add a new payee, right? As you can see, you need to fill out with different information, then click add, and those different steps sometimes is not possible to be identified by just an automated crawler. So this is our second macro that we're gonna describe now, which is called the workflow macro. We just created a login macro, which can help us to authenticate. But what if we also want to specifically tell the scanner to come to account activity, go to credit cards, and then find transactions, put something here, and then go to transfer funds, change it from checking to loan, let's say, and then an amount of whatever. And we want, like here in this case, guys, you can see that there are multiple steps, right? In the description, you click continue. As you can see, it is a 2 steps process here. So probably this is not going to be able to be identified by an automated crawler, because it needs to be intelligent to know that it is 2 process, and then after that click on submit, which is close to impossible. So we're going to create a second macro which can tell this application to follow those steps, right? So we're going to do that in a second. So just coming back to the scanner here, it's going to take some time, and the reason is because the hardware on this specific lab is not the best, so it's kind of slow, but plus it is time consuming. By the way, WebInspect uses SQL Express as a default database, which is free, but it's not the fastest one also. So eventually we're gonna start seeing here attacks sent and all this information, so that we know that it is running properly. So you can see here the analysis start incrementing. You can see the total request is 1. It's kind of starting slowly creating crawl 0 of 2, audit text 0 of 1. And here, this is the dashboard, guys. It's pretty cool. In the dashboard, you are going to start seeing here the critical vulnerabilities found, the high vulnerabilities found, the medium, low, the informational ones, which are not vulnerabilities but good to know, the best practices, and you're going to start seeing all the details in the dashboard. You can see now that I scroll. Now here you can see, guys, that it is going to log in and sign in. You can see that. So that means that it is trying to authenticate. So if we go to the login, we can see something like, let's it's a little bit slow, but anyways, in the sign in, guys, if we try to increment the view in a few seconds, let's check here. If we try to increment the view, you can see that the post sent as expected, user login, username, and user password. You remember that? That's because of our login macro. So that means it is working properly. Here we have the vulnerabilities are gonna be listed here. Keep in mind that we only tested for cross-site scripting, just to do it quick. We can come back to the dashboard so that we can see how it is performing. And well, we're gonna leave it a little bit so that it can work. You can see that it is making some progress. There are no vulnerabilities found so far, but it is running. While waiting for that, we can come here and we're gonna open another option for us, which is in this case the web macro recorder, sorry, the workflow macro recorder. So let's see how that works, guys. So we go to HP Security Toolkit and we go to workflow macro recorder. Okay, so that now what we are gonna do now is what I just described. I'm gonna create a macro, workflow macro, that not only is gonna authenticate to the web application, but also is gonna go to specific sections of the application so that we can reach those kind of 2-step or 3-step wizards, and therefore we can be able to cover the full application. It is coming up. As I said, it's a little bit of time consuming, but eventually we will get it. Okay. We can see that the macro, you can see these guys, macro requests 85. That's pretty cool because it's telling us that it's using our macro. And but let's see how it goes. Okay. It is coming. Our web macro workflow recorder. Oh, you can see here, guys, manipulation, attack 35, exploratory 31, audited 12 of 21. So it is making progress, but we have not found anything yet. Okay, so let's try to I'm gonna make a pause and we will come back in a few minutes later once we have some results and our web macro is up and running. So we are back, and the scan, another cool feature that it has is that we can pause it. In this case I pause it and then we can start resuming later. It doesn't make any sense to keep going. It can take hours, right? So but the idea is that you guys can see how it looks on the scanner, and in the next class I'm gonna show you another scan with vulnerability so that you can see how we can validate them. So I'm gonna close this scan, which is the one with the login macro. As you saw, it was successfully used in order to authenticate. And let's talk about workflow macro. Okay, so for that one it's exactly the same thing. So basically we go to the website, right? Exactly the same approach as with the login macro. So we go to the website. Once we are in the website, and let me increment this. Probably this. Okay, so we reach the website. Okay, and then now we say record. Okay, so we go again to sign in. You can see again in the left side the steps are being followed exactly as we are doing it. We go with the username and with the password. We click on sign in. Once we are authenticated, we're gonna go to specific sections that we wanna scan. Let's say that we go to account activity. As you can see there, click on account activity in the left side, and then from here we can say find transactions. We just put something here just so that we can send the request. Keep in mind that in this case we want to find other inputs. When we click here on find, it was recorded in the macro and is another source of potential vulnerabilities. Transfer funds. We say savings, change it to checkings. Let's say that 100, and the description is just test. We click on continue, and this one, as you remember, is the 2 steps wizard. So second step, we click on submit. You successfully submitted your transaction, right? So basically this is our macro. Let's go one more. Let's say we go to pay bills. We say from sprint account savings. Let's say we're gonna pay $20 on, let's say, the 22. Description, second test. As you can, and then we click on pay. As you can see in the left side, everything is being recorded exactly as it is. Okay, so we are done. Let's say that this is the only thing that we want to test. We can keep going, but so that you get the idea. We click on stop. Okay, and then as you remember, web inspect tell us, hey guys, try to verify if it works properly by replaying the macro. So let's see if that works. We click on play, and then the macro says, okay, I went to the website, put the username, put the password, click on sign in. I am inside. Now go to account activity, find transactions, put test, click on find, then to go to transfer funds, change to checking 100, test, click on continue, and you can see the second step and the third was executed properly. Pretty cool. Then we go to pay bills, the date and the description. Second test, and then finally pay. And that's pretty much it, guys. You can see that it was executed successfully. So we say yes, and finally we just save our macro. In this case, I don't know, web macro 1. Also, we just replace it. So is that cool, right? It's pretty cool. And then again, you can always come here and say, you know what, this type 20 arguments, change it to whatever, you know. It's highly configurable. Okay, even in some steps, let me check, let me see if I find another steps interesting. Okay, so here in account activity, when we click on account activity, guys, it is the macro scanner is smart enough to say we have alternate steps here. You click on there and it says you can either go to click on account activity, or you can go to account activity list box, or you can select the option 2. In other words, it can skip some of them. Why? Because it can reach directly all those other links. It doesn't rely on a step by step in those specific links, and therefore it can tell you we can do other paths if you want, right? So that's pretty cool also, and pretty useful, because sometimes if your macro is not playing, you can try another step. You can say, let's try this or this, you know, and eventually you will be able to execute it properly. So that's pretty much it with the macros. we learn about login macros and workflow macros in order to allow the web scanner to log into the application, and in this case to go to specific multi-step wizards that cannot be possible in a automated way. Okay, so last but not least, so we have here an example of how a scan looks like with all the different findings in all the different locations. So you can see here that there are multiple links inside the authenticated pages. Remember, account activity, find transactions, show transactions, summary, funds, confirm, verify. So that was because of our macro that we recorded, the workflow macro. And here we have all the findings. So if we go to the dashboard, as you remember, the dashboard is going to tell us, okay, so we found how many criticals, highs, medium, low, all of them. So for the high ones, there is a typical cross-site scripting. So here it's very important for you guys to validate and verify that those are true positives. As you can see, you can have multiple vulnerabilities, but you need to validate it in order to make sure that whatever is being reported by the tool, it is a true positive. It can be very embarrassing if you just print the report, because you can generate a report right now. I can tell you how. So you just click on report here, and then you will generate a report based on the findings. But that's not good, because if for some reason there are some FPs, false positives, then it's gonna be on you, and the confidence for you and the stakeholders, the developers, is gonna be really bad. Can you imagine that you are saying that it is a cross-site or SQL injection just because of the scanner, and it's not true? That's very bad image, because then the people is gonna say, hey, you're not validating anything, right? I mean, what is the value of you just generating a report from this tool instead of adding value by verifying it? So it's pretty easy to generate a report. We just click on, in this case, the scan 0, which is in this case the web scan, the site. Then normally you generate the kind of report you want. It can be a vulnerability in this case to check, and the vulnerabilities you can say, get me all of them, or probably you just want, critical and high. Probably give me the appendix X, which is cool because it's gonna give all the details of those different issues. I recommend also the request and response, because if someone wants to replicate it, they will have all the details how it was attacked and the response in order to give the evidence that it was vulnerable. And if you click finish, it's gonna be generated. I'm not gonna click on it because I already generated, so I'm just gonna cancel it. I'm gonna show you in a minute. But before going there, we need to validate that these are true positives. So one way to do it is pretty easy. You just, for example, in this case, cross-site scripting, just right click on it, tools, HTTP editor. That is gonna open a client, HTTP client, which basically is gonna allow us to resubmit that specific transaction, in this case to verify. And it's pretty cool because it also has the cookie and everything, so that we can be already authenticated. Here you can see that the vulnerable parameter is description, because it is adding this specific information. If you know a little bit about hexadecimal, you can realize that here is like double quotes, greater than, 3C, which is less than, S, C, well, capital C, R, capital I, P, capital T, greater than, which means mainly it means script, and then alert, then 28, which is the open parenthesis, inside we have 38, which is 8, 35, which is 5, so 8 5 3 7, 8 5 3 7 7, and then the closing parentheses and everything. So it's 35, sorry, 80, 85 here, 85 37 7. So we click on send, we get a response. If we go to the response, if you remember how to validate cross-site scripting, in this case, guys, for some reason it is redirecting us to the login page. That means our session expired. That means we cannot validate it here, okay? But it's not a problem. What we can do, actually it's pretty cool, because I'm gonna show you a different option. This was just the easiest way, but since the session expired already, so probably because you leave it run all the night, and by the time you're trying to check it, it is already expired. So what we can do is we can fire up, let's use HP proxy, web proxy. That web proxy is just basically for us to intercept HTTP requests and responses, okay? So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna go to this site, right? We're gonna, here it is. So I'm gonna put it aside a little bit. I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna click on sign in, and eventually I'm just gonna log into this application and then go to that specific section. If you check here, it says that the section, it is in bank transfer funds verify, okay? So we need to go to that specific section, which is actually this, okay? So let's try to go there. For some reason this application is not responding. Let's see what's going on. Okay, we go to the main page, we go to the signing, we go to username, password, and then we go to the transfer funds. You can see here transfer funds, we are in that specific section. Now we need to do a transfer, but we want to intercept the request in order to inject our malicious post parameter, vulnerable parameter, post parameter. So we go to tools, internet options is not working, so let's come here, internet options, we go to connections, LAN settings, and we enable the proxy, which is listening 8080, and we can confirm that if we come to the web proxy, we come to settings, we can see that it says 8080, okay? It's gonna say stop on request and response, so that we can intercept both communications, and we just play it. So we put here like any amount and the description, we click on continue, and it says submit. As you can see, it's ready. We click on submit. Oh, and it was successfully intercepted, but we didn't see anything here. That was my bad. I forgot to say intercept. Okay, so no worries, we can come here and then we'll go to transfer funds again, anything, we put an amount, we put a description, and before sending the request, well, actually we will send the first one, and before sending the submit, we're gonna say intercept, and then we click on submit, and we should get this intercepted here, interactive mode. You can see we intercepted the request, and here, if you remember the check, it was in the description field. We were supposed to put this, so we just copy paste it here, and the numbers I'm just gonna change to 777, which is actually 37, 37, 37. That's it, only sevens. And then we click on send. We let it go. We get a response to the client. Before sending to the browser, we get it. If we try to find here, guys, our injection, it should be somewhere. It should be somewhere. The issue is we need to find it. Let me check. I don't know. Where is it? I don't see it. You see it, guys? If you see it, please let me know, because I don't see it. I can do something pretty cool, pretty quick. Okay, I can do something like this. Oh, it didn't copy it. Anyways, save data. Okay, so let's save it quickly. Desktop, whatever, and then we go to the desktop. I just wanna try to find the alert. It's not there. Something happens, it's not being executed properly. Don't worry, let's find out the reason. So we click send, and then it says you successfully submitted your transaction. Okay, so let's do this. I'm gonna disable the interaction, come back. Probably it's before that. Oh, I know, yeah. Okay, see what happened, guys? What I did was, by the time I did the injection was too late. The cross-site scripting is right here, because when I put here amount, right, and when I click here in description, when I click on continue, this information is gonna be copy paste back into the browser, right? So here is where I need to do the injection. Here, you see, it is just about to send something, and here I'm gonna put the injection again, 37, 37, 37, and here this is gonna be sent and copy back in the response. Now if we search here for that information, I swear we're gonna find it. Okay, replace it, yes. And actually we can find it here probably, guys. Let's see if we can see it quickly. Yes, you can see here is the script alert 777. You can see the script alert, right? This was a pretty cool exercise, because as you can see, it is not filtered, and therefore is a true positive cross-site scripting. And the reason I was not getting it is because I was doing the injection in the late step. Okay, so we say send, and we get our pop-up. Okay, guys, and we get it twice. So we just saw how we can confirm a vulnerability by either using the Web Inspect HTTP editor. If this is not expired, we can do it right here. We can just say here send, and it's gonna be exactly the same. But the problem was that it was already expired, the session, So we are going to log in, as you can see here. That's the reason that we didn't get anything. And then, since this was not possible, what I did was, okay, it's fine. So let's just open our proxy, web proxy, which is a tool that comes with Web Inspect, and we just intercept it and do it manually. And we confirm that this guy is a true positive. We need to do the same for all the remaining guys. So I'm gonna leave you that as an exercise for you guys, and so that you can tell me if I'm gonna throw some questions so that you can validate and let me know if those are vulnerables or not. So as I said, the final step is, once you validate everything, now you can remove, right? Because let's say that what, like this one, guys, let's say that this is not valid for some reason. So we can say mark as false positive. Okay. Description: this is not a real vulnerability. Issue with scanner, whatever you want, guys. And then we say, even you can send it to HP support. That's not the case. So we just put it that way. What that means, guys, is that it is gonna be, it's not gonna be added to your report, because it's supposed to be something that is not vulnerable, right? You can also say, you know what, ignored, and it's gonna even disappear from here. Okay, so either way, you are reducing the vulnerabilities found, and eventually you will have your own set of validated vulnerabilities. Let's say here, this is not, let's assume it's not valid, you can remove it. Okay, so with this you can reduce, and once you have everything ready, you can then go ahead and say report, as I showed before. Let me show you a report that I generated. It is always exported as a PDF file. You can save the capture, by the way, of the proxy, all the information, if you want. So this is just a PDF report, and I want to show you how it looks like. And it is going to report everything that you mark, and as you remember, critical height, whatever you want. And here is just, you know, the title. You can put executed summary, but it's pretty cool because it's gonna say, you know, this is scan name, this is the policy used, in this case standard. As I said, use your own policies, closed sessions, vulnerabilities, duration, this is the URL, critical issue, here is the request, here is the response, which is saying that why it is critical. As you can see, this information disclosure, too much information to the attacker. But in the left side, you can have all the different kinds. So like critical issues, you know, buffer overflow, for example. It says, okay, so I'm sending this, too much information. So you can see here how they are replicated, cross-site scripting, you send this big thing in the search term, blah, blah, blah. So you have all the details, and these whole details comes from your analysis. This report, once it is validated, it is pretty useful and is going to be used to discuss with the developers all the findings. So hope you enjoy it, guys. Hey guys, so again with another lab about web scanners. This time we're gonna be talking about a really cool tool which is from IBM, and it is called AppScan, which is actually one of the most important tools in the market nowadays, competing directly with HP Web Inspect. So we're gonna walk you through that tool so that you can see how it works and you can see the comparison with HP. As you know, we also have Acunetics. So we have kind of the best tools in the market as our promise, so that you guys can have the option to play with them in the labs. Okay, so let's get started. So we have here our IBM tool. We're gonna open it, and in this case it's called Security App Scan Standard. So it is really similar to Web Inspect. So it has kind of similar interface, same style of testing policies, same style of configuration, but we're gonna talk about some of the major differences. Okay, so first of all, you will have a window where you can choose if you wanna open and scan that you previously created. That's the same with Web Inspect, or you can create a new scan. Okay, new scan, or you can also see the recent scans that you did before. On the right side is documentation about AppScan. You can go to the website, you can see training videos, you can see PDF information. Okay, and we left the checkbox display this screen when AppScan launches, so that every time we wanna run it, you know, it will show up. So we choose by create new scan. Now it's time to select what kind of scan we wanna do. There are predefined templates where we can choose in the right side. A regular scan is the normal way. You can configure all the details. A quick and light scan is kind of faster, so that you have less options to decide. Just click and run. You have parameter based navigation, which is where you will configure it. It takes more time, of course, because you need to recognize the parameters. WebSphere or WebSphere portal, those are basically, as you know, or you might know, IBM owns WebSphere, which is basically a web application server. So they offer the option to obviously scan those kind of technologies. And we have here some vulnerable websites that we can also open for testing. So let's go with the regular scan. Okay, then show up the wizard. It's pretty simple. In the left side here we have the full scan configuration. We will talk about that in a second. It's basically all the different options from the scanner, but let's move forward. We always choose app scan, which is what we want to do, you know, to do a scan using the tool. Here we're gonna put the destination website that we are gonna check. Okay, then at this time AppScan is gonna try to connect to the server. Of course, you need to have internet connectivity in order for it to reach it. It is green, it's connected, and then you can say always scan only links in and below this directory. Why? Sometimes most important and more common in the environments, web servers with virtual how do you call it, multiple hosts, multi-hosting. Yeah, that's the word, multi-hosting. You will have the same IP address but different domains hosted in the same server, right? So you might have one directory from one server, and then you might have another directory from another totally different website, and there you will have two different directories for the two different applications. And if you don't put this restriction, you might start also scanning other directories from other applications. So it is always recommended to say just from here down, don't go to other directories. Also, another scenario is where you might wanna just scan within a website, but just under a specific folder. You said, okay, just scan under admin and everything else, but nothing above. Don't go to the root path of the website. It's just a way to restrict what you want to scan. So we're gonna say scan only links and below this directory. In our case, doesn't make any difference because we are actually right connecting to the root directory. Okay, let's click on next. I mean, we're gonna skip some of the options, guys, which I mean is hundreds of options for scanning, but just the ones that we wanna really understand, we're gonna leave it. If you need to configure proxy or HTTP authentication so that your app scan connects through your proxy, you need to enable this box. It's not the case for us. Next. So here, this is another thing very important. This is macros. We talk about macros in WebInspect. Every respected scanner like AppScan, WebInspect, Acunetics, they have this ability to create macros. As you remember, Office macros where you record your activities and you can replay them. It's exactly the same here, but the idea is that you can go walk through the application, log into it, so that the scanner can use that information in order to log in automatically into the application, and then it can be able to scan authenticated sections. Okay. Also, the macros are very useful where, for example, you have a specific places in your application that requires like a captcha or requires like a specific information that you need to move into a wizard, for example. You have to do 3 steps and then can submit a form. Those specific cases are not going to be caught or handled by a web application scanner. So you can use a macro to tell the scanner how to walk through those different wizard steps, and that way you can reach more sections in the application. That's the main point, guys. So you need to reach all the different paths within the application. The scanner is of course capable to find different paths, but those ones that I explained might not be reachable, and therefore you might be losing opportunities to find vulnerabilities, leaving your site open for attack. Okay, we're gonna skip at this point this specific macro, which is authenticated scan. We're gonna talk about that later. So I'm just gonna do a quick scan for you guys so that you can see how that works. We click next. Here you will define the policy. This is exactly the same as the other solutions. So you will have different policies, and based on the policies you can decide what you want to test. You have already pre-calculated policies based on some specific actions. If you click on those policies, you will see in the right side the explanation that the vital few, that is just the least required testing with high probabilities of success, but it is fast. Okay, you have for web services and specific template for SOAP requests. You have the invasive scan, which is basically testing kind of more hard attacks like denial of services, which can affect the stability of your system, or buffer overflows, that can definitely take down your application if it is vulnerable. So those is up to you if you want to go for it. You need to ask for authorization. Complete is just basically do all different checks, which is gonna obviously takes a lot of time. Application only and those things. Or if you define your own macro, because you can create it, you can browse it and load it. Okay, so we're gonna talk about, in this case, the vital few because it's kind of quick for us. We have 2 different checkboxes, which one says send tests on login and logout pages. Do not send session identifiers when testing login pages. That's just the default. It's just dealing with authentication of the website. We don't need it at this point because we are not going to be dealing with any authentication. We click on next, and then it says you successfully finish it. How do you want it to start? Start a full automatic scan. Start with, which means it will just go to the main page and start crawling, which means identifying different resources, which are pages, and then it's going to start trying to submit forms, and it's going to eventually start going to just do it automatically. The second option is automated explore, which is just basically crawling. It's not scanning, just crawling to identify all the different tree or all the different folders and resources. You can also start with manual explore, which means you will walk the scanner through the different sections and you will fill out forms. That way the scanner can use that information during the actual scan. That's pretty useful. Or I will scan later. Okay, so let's do in this case, guys, the full automatic scan, because we are not going into the details of the authentication, so that we can see how it works. Before doing finish, guys, let me just walk you quickly through some of the configurations of the scanner. As I said, there are many options. So let's just talk about some of the most important ones. So if we go to login management, we almost saw many of them. So here is, as you remember, is the macro that we want to record so that the scanner can log in into the page. We have environment definition. Okay, yeah. So you can tell the application what is the web server. If you know in advance that it is an IIS, Apache, IBM, you can tell it. That way, the scanner doesn't need to enumerate it, doesn't need to guess it. That will speed up the scan. Same for the application server. You know, if you know it, the type of database, so that it can focus the SQL injection attacks based on a database, and any third-party component, you know, like CMS, content management solutions. So everything that you can put into the environment definition will help to speed up. And there are other cases, but that's pretty much. You can always exclude. Normally the scanner is going to exclude all the images or torrent files, zip files, video files, those that doesn't make sense to scan, right? Explore options. You can put the scan limits. For example, the maximum number of times identical paths may be scanned. You know, if you have the same path, you won't want to scan it over and over again, right? You need to put a limit, but I suggest don't move anything from here, guys. It's just standard. As it says, parse JavaScript. Of course, you need to parse JavaScript. Encoding auto detect, user agent auto detect, so you don't need to move it anything here. Parameters and cookies, this is just basically if you wanna put some specific actions. So a really simple example is like, let's say that your parameter is a cookie. You wanna probably exclude the cookie from being testing, because if you are authenticated and you use the cookie to be attacked, in other words, to put malicious content in the cookie, you will lose your authentication, right? Because you will lose your token. So that might affect your scan. So in these cases is where you can go here and say, you put the name of your cookie, you put the host, in this case our host, the path, and you can say something like, don't test this cookie, which is going to skip it. Okay, that's basically the idea. Automatic form fill, this is basically if the scanner sees a parameter with the name addr in the HTML form, it will fill out automatically with this information. That means if you find another specific field and you want to put it, just go add the specific parameter, let's say credit card, you know, and you can put like something like that, you know, guys. And then you must put, of course, the URL. So that's the basic idea, and then you will add it, and then it will, every time if it finds that field, it will use your suggestion. Okay, guys. Error pages, nothing, no big deal. It's just to identify error pages, so that the website knows when there is something wrong. Let's say that the application you are scanning has custom error pages. You can add it here so that the scanner knows when there is an error page. Okay, so that can help it to know that it was not reachable, the URL was not reachable, or that might be some issues, and it can alert every time it finds within a test that there is an error message. It's important. Okay, so these multi-step operations is basically macros that you can go and walk. We talk about login macros, right? Login macros is just for authentication, but you can have a real whole macro where you can walk the scanner through all the different forms and fill out whatever you want here step by step, and the scanner is gonna use it. Okay. See this point, guys. It says these recorded multi-step operations access parts of the application that are reached only when requests are sent in a specific order. It's exactly what I was telling you about the wizards. Let's say there is a wizard that you need to complete 3 steps in order to submit the form. So here is where you can tell the scanner, go 1 and 2 and 3 steps, fill out with this information, and then the scanner will follow it in order to be able to, at the end of the day, attack that specific form. That's what the scanner wants to do. Okay, I'm gonna go a little bit fast. Glass box, I don't want to talk about those. Communication is the proxy. Authentication, if you want to put authentication that is needed. The test policies, this is pretty cool, and this is very similar to Web Inspect. So here you will have all the different tests, guys. Let's say that we talk about buffer overflows, which is not the case, right? In web applications is not the case. I mean, there might be cases, but it's not. Actually, let's talk about a different one. Let's talk about cross-site scripting, which is very common. So if you open it up, you will see that internally you have hundreds of tests based on applications. If you click on this one, let's say, you will get the information that the webmail client index.php is vulnerable to this cross-site scripting. So basically, if you have that application, makes sense because you will find the vulnerability. But if you are just scanning your application that is not webmail client, you don't need it, and actually it will slow down dramatically your scan if you are just testing every single web application with a vulnerability, which is exactly what this policies does. They go and grab vulnerabilities found in internet from those different web applications and put it in this database so that it can be checked. So it doesn't make sense. The only thing that makes sense to be enabled is actually the generic check for cross-site scripting. Let me show you here. You can see Apache, all those different solutions that will have multiple vulnerabilities. So here we have this check, which is just basically saying cross-site scripting. Check for cross-site scripting. That's the kind of enable thing that we need to do. Just the cross-site scripting check. And it is exactly the same for the other ones. So let's say, for example, that we go to SQL injection. Okay, so SQL injection is the same idea. You have multiple applications with SQL injection vulnerability, but you just wanna select blind SQL injection, which is a specific test, not application aware. It will just do the test, and the same for the other normal scanners. We have like database error pattern found. So it is basically, you know, selecting just the ones that are not related to a specific application. Okay, guys, that's just a tip for you guys to put. And SQL injection, right, which is blind and then SQL injection. So that's basically what we are talking about here, guys. And you will have always a description at the bottom and the fixed recommendation for every single vulnerability. That's pretty much it, guys. This is just generic information. Privilege escalation, if you want to add a user to run in a different role within your application. Let's say you have an admin, you have an operator, you have a low-level user, you can add them to have different levels of access. Sorry, different type of checks if there is an enforcement of authorization, which means based on the user will be able to reach certain sections within the application. Okay, malware is pretty cool because what AppScan can do is if it finds a URL, it can go and grab that URL and check if it is something malicious there. Okay, guys, So I just click on OK, and I will do a finish. Okay, it says that if you wanna store, we say yes, CSTT, let's say, we save it. And then at this point, guys, I'm gonna just explain you while the scan is running this interface. So basically, we have in the left side the file, which you can open new scanners, you can export the contents, you can import also the content, print. You have the edit, scan. Here you can pause the scan, run it again, explore web services. You know, web services, we talk about that. If you want to extend web services, in the view you have different views. This application view, application data view, security issues view, and remediation tasks view, you can also reach it here in the right side, data, issues, and tasks. So basically data is just all the requests that you are seeing, and within those requests you can see the parameters too that are being identified. You can see the cookies, if any, the pages, which is basically everything that it is being touched, the failed request, something that it is not responding, or like in this case there is an internal error, that might be actually a vulnerability. Filtered, everything that is not being scanned, like the mainly styles and images, and that's pretty much it. Well, of course, JavaScript and comments. This is kind of cool because the comments is basically finding comments within scripts. Like in this case, it says feedback, and then is talking about something, but the important stuff is they have a local directory that can give you an idea where the file system, the file system, which in this case is clear that it is Windows, also can give you an idea of where is the content of the web server located at, which you can leverage once you find a vulnerability. The next one is issues. Issues is gonna give you all the different issues found so far, but the issues you need to click on the demo, or in this case on the website. If you click on a specific page, it will it will list the issues just for that specific page, so be careful with that. So for example, if you click on default ESPX, it will give you the issues only on that one, and you might think that there is nothing found. You need to click always on the root so that you can have everything. In this left side, we also have all the different crawling, the different folders and resources identified. And finally, in the right side is tasks. Tasks are mainly remediation. We'll see that when we have more options. In order for the scanner to complete, you can see at the bottom it says that it found some expert recommendation. Scan expert is basically saying, hey, I found an Apache, I found this database. So those things that can help to speed up and has better results. So we'll say apply recommendations, and then the scan is going to start running and doing the scan based on what it was found, based on the URL, and it's going to start giving us information. Okay, guys. So while the scan is running, we are going to have I want to describe other information. So as you see, it's pretty simple, guys. It is pretty easy to use. Now you can see that it is running faster. It is doing some crawling. Okay, and if for example we are here and it finds a vulnerability, the issues view is going to start blinking so that you can see there is something there. In Web Inspect, they have a dashboard, which to be honest I prefer it because it's more like a graph with some countings of the tests being done and the ones remaining. But I mean, there is also other options in AppScan that are better in my opinion, but you guys feel free to to use it and see what's better for you guys. Okay, so we can see that scanning testing is running at the bottom. You can see how it is changing. You can actually see also all those different tests. You can click also at the top in scan log, which is going to report everything that is going on. So for example, here it's going to say test SQL injection is positive. It found a SQL injection, and those positives means true positives, real hits, real vulnerabilities found. Okay, it is just the login of this specific scanner. Power tools. Power tools, you basically have authentication tester. This is a brute forcer. So basically what you can do here is that if you don't know the passwords of that specific website, you can always say, hey, let's try to brute force it. So what you can do is you can say a setup, and then you will need to navigate to the site. So let's go to our site. In this case is demo. So we're gonna brute force this website to see if we can find credentials. Obviously, if those are weak credentials, it will find it. It has dictionary based attacks, but it can also have brute force approach. And once we found it, we can use it in an authenticated scan. Okay, so basically you need to go to the website and you need to put brute username as the username and brute password as the password. And the reason of that is because the scanner will search for those and replace them with their own attempts. Okay, so we go to signing, and then we say here brute username, and then brute password, and then we click on login request captured, it says. And here it detected those specific strings inside, which basically means I know how I can identify a successful login. If you have more, you can say add, and you can add another string. At this time, we are fine with that, you know. Those account details, welcome and hello, those are for that specific login authenticated page. We click OK, and then let me show you just advanced. In advanced, guys, we have obviously the number of threads to run. It's just for performance things. In the form authentication, as we saw, we have the login detection, so that the scanner knows when it has been authenticated properly. And as I said, the username and password is just used for the brute forcing. It will replace it with the combination of attempts. The proxy, just if you have a proxy. Credential generation, this is what I was saying. You can do matrix, which basically means combination of users and passwords. You can do parallel, which basically means use username and password in the same row, which is kind of faster but not as intensive. Okay. In the element type here, you can put dictionary, numeric, constant, or character range. So we're going to leave it as dictionary, but let's say that you want to do some brute forcing, right? You can do, for example, here, character range, and you can say, let's say here from A to C, and the length 6, let's say. So you add it. So now it's going to be a character range, which is going to check from all the lowercase with a length of 6. Okay, I'm just gonna remove it because it's not the case, but so that you guys know, that's another option. So we go by dictionary, we just go by brute forcing it based on a list. AppScan has some default list like passwords, password longs, usernames, but you can always use your own one, like RockU, which is very famous. Okay, and then we click on start, guys, and then what's gonna start is, if you remember, if you already took our certification with all different classes, we did this exercise with Burp Suite, and we also did it with Hydra, which basically is to try to brute force. You can see that right away it found 2 different passwords. I mean, in this case it's a demo, but eventually, if you, that's really cool, because if you find the credentials because are weak, man, you just get in, you don't need to exploit anything. Okay, so I'm just gonna stop it since it got some of them, and we can always test it. Okay guys, so we are gonna write down this one, the J Smith demo 124, which, because we're gonna use it in our authenticated scan. So at this point, the scan says scan incomplete, it didn't finish, and it says that some forms require user input and suggest to go to user information, user interaction needed. So here it's saying that it needs some authentication, and that's why it didn't complete it properly. And we know that, right? We know that we were not gonna scan authenticated URLs. So for example, if you go to bank in the left side, you can see that there are some URLs with a cross check like this, which means it just failed the request. It didn't reply, and you can see there are many of them, like customize, login, logout, main. Actually, main is this main, guys. It is when you are authenticated, you will get access to those ones. Transaction is also inside, but you can see that it didn't find anything because it is not authenticated. It found the reference via href HTML option. They found the references to those URLs, but they were not able to scan it. Okay guys, so that's pretty much it. Let me show you just a couple of more tools, but before that, this is actually the way it works. If you go to issues, you will find some whatever issues you found. If you click on demo, which is the main website, you can see there that those are the findings. Okay guys, we're gonna talk about the findings later. I don't wanna that's gonna be a separate second phase on this 101, so I'm just gonna finish it talking about the interface. So the next one is connection test. So this basically is like a ping. It's gonna, let's say that we go to demo dot testfire.net. We click on ping site, and you can see that it's just basically doing a head request, and you can see if it is alive or not. It's pretty simple, it's nothing fancy, but that's it. And then we have other things like encoding. In the encoding thing, you basically want, if you want to encode something to base 64, let's say, you can put here the input, and let's say that this thing, and you wanna encode it, and it's gonna be give you, you know, the base 64 encoded version of it, or you can use any other one. So that's it, no big deal. And we have other ones. Expression test is just to test regular expressions. HTTP request editor is pretty similar to Web Inspect. It's just a client to submit requests. You know, you can do manually here and submit your request, and you can see the response. It's just basic stuff. Okay guys, and token analyzer is just to check if there is any if it is possible to find tokens which can be misused. Okay guys, and but that's something that we are not seeing today. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. The manual explore, guys, is that you can go and test the vulnerabilities, but we will see that when we are dealing with the findings. Okay, so since now we are done with this, I'm just gonna save this scan, which we call it CSTT. And let's try to do another one. Okay, we're gonna say new scan with current configuration, which means whatever I choose, just use it. But this time I'm gonna you can click on scan full scan, but I'm just gonna go to the configuration. I'm gonna go to login management, and this time, guys, I'm gonna record a macro. Okay, guys, so that you can see how a macro works. This is authenticated scan. So basically, we start recorded, we click on record, and we said you have two options. You can use the AppScan browser to record the interaction, or you can use an external browser, but it's recommended to use AppScan because of compatibility. In case that doesn't work, then of course you can use another one. We click on it and we say yes, it is just authenticating to the website. We go again and click on the demo one, okay, and it will try to access it. So we are there, and then it is recording, as you can see here, automatically. We click on sign in. Here we put our J Smith that we learned from the cracking effort. Then the password, demo1234. We click on login, and you can see that we have the hello, welcome, view account details, congratulations. Those are indicators that we have logged in successfully. At this point, we click on I am logged into the site, so the AppScan can grab that information and understand what means when it is authenticated. And then every time that the scan is going on, if for some reason, every time the scan is going on, it will request again and again access to that particular resource, and if it doesn't get the expected response, it will realize the user has been disconnected. Then it will try to reconnect it again. Okay, this green button, guys, means it was successfully authenticated. In other words, it tested the macro and that works perfectly. Okay, so then what we are gonna do now, guys, is before moving, here in the details you can see how it works, the flow. So it went to the login, eventually it posts the login credentials here, and then it says get, which is the main ASPX. Okay, guys, what else? The session ID, which is that one that it found within that specific session. Okay, guys, and now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna choose a different test policy. Let's say that we want application only, which has again its own configuration. And now also let's also try to check. Let me check what else we can do. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, I think we have everything we need. We say apply, and then everything that we just configured here, guys, that's gonna be ready for us. We click OK, and then we click on scan full scan. Okay, we click yes, and this is gonna be called CSTT auth. By the way, guys, I already saved this exercise in AuthScan. We will open it later because that definitely takes too much time, but I just want you to see how it's gonna be start reacting differently. So what I want to show you is that we are supposed to now get access to restricted pages that requires authentication. Okay, so that's very important. So we are supposed to be able to do that. At this point, the scanning is just trying to do a recognition of the server, trying to see if it is something that it can identify that can help to scan faster, and after that it will be able to start doing the scan. Okay, not right now, it's just exploring, going through all those different sections. And at the bottom, by the way, guys, you can see the number of security issues identified, also the number of high vulnerabilities, medium, low, and informational vulnerabilities. Okay, let's keep exploring, and eventually it's going to start scanning. It is, and this actually apps can call it exploring, Web Inspect calls it crawling, but it's exactly the same thing. Okay, in the banks, guys, you remember the main? This is the main, and you can see that now we have others. We have actually query, we have transaction, we have transfer. So looks like we are successfully getting access. Let's see the request. We can see the request on, actually let's go to main. We go to main, which we know is the page that is supposed to be accessed when you authenticated successfully. So we see the request. Let's see the response. So here is the response. Let's see if we grab the strings. Here is one, my account. So looks like we are inside. Here we have a view account summary, which basically means the profile of the user, which suggests definitely we're inside. And here is the hello, John Smith. So we can see that our macro works perfectly. Welcome. And then we are able to now reach more information, reach other sections, and that way we can be able to get more vulnerabilities. Okay, guys, so that's pretty much it about the scanning. And let's talk about oh, by the way, you can see how it's blinking the issues. It's because it got a new issue found. If we click on it, it's gonna say, hey, I found something. We click on here, and it is like eventually finding more stuff. So at this point, guys, I'm gonna just stop it, and then let's discuss in our next class a little bit about the vulnerabilities identified, to see how we can work with them. Okay, guys, so see you in the next one. Okay, guys, so as I said, I'm gonna just open at this point the scan. I'm stopping the scan. As I said, I'm not gonna run it, and this we are gonna talk about, guys, more about the findings and how we can test them. Okay, how we can validate the vulnerabilities identified, which is very important for you guys, because we need to be able to go to the developers and say this is a confirmed vulnerability. If we go and say, hey, we just grab all the findings and prepare the report and send it to them, first of all, there is no value. Everyone can just run a scan and send the report. We need to validate it first, and second, explain the developers how it works, the impact of the vulnerability, and how they can fix it. Okay, for that, let me open one of the scans. I'm gonna open let's say this one is done, probably yes. Let's see, do you want to save changes? We say yes, and now we open our second scan. Okay, so in this scan is the one that we did without authentication. So whenever you have findings, guys, okay, you can always go to the view security issues, so that you can have the view here in the middle, or as I said before, you just click on the right side issues to see them. Okay, every issue will have 4 tabs. The first tab is the issue information, which is basically where is the issue, the name of the vulnerability and where it was identified. The advisory, which talks about cross-site scripting or any other vulnerability. The fix recommendation is very important to know how to fix it so that we can talk to the developer. We know about how to fix these things because we attend our labs where we actually do real code detection. Okay, guys? And the request and response, very important, because if you want to reproduce it, you can actually come to the problem, click on it, and then you will see the request and response. Okay, here is the request, post, and the OK is the response with all the information. Okay, guys, so that's basically the way it works. So let's say that you wanna reproduce it because you wanna test it if it is a real vulnerability. So let's check about SQL injection. Okay, so we go with SQL injection and it says, hey, there is a vulnerability here, and you can see that in the post request in the login page it is sending %27. When you deal with web applications, you will get familiar with those hexadecimal numbers. %27 is single quote, which is a very, very well basic test to find vulnerabilities related to SQL injection. Okay, and the second one is 3B, which is semicolon sign. Now, for SQL injection, as you know, guys, normally you will get SQL syntax error messages, and eventually you will leverage to get access to the database. In this case, if we go to the response to the bottom, we can see right away that there is a SQL error message coming from the engine. We can see here the system data OLIDB, which is telling us it is coming actually from the DB engine, and all the different problems there related to the SQL, saying character found after SQL statement. So here at this point we can at least be sure to confirm that there is a SQL injection just by looking at the response, but I always recommend you to test it manually. So for this case, since we saw how it works, let's try to do that exercise. So we go here and say manual explorer. We click on it. It will open the AppScan browser and we just go to that place. Okay, and we're gonna say here, we learned that these guys put here colon, semicolon, and here put any garbage. We click login and you can see right away that we were able to reproduce the same message, right? Here is the whole SQL statement coming from the engine, which suggests definitely that it is a SQL injection. Obviously, these 101 things can help us to just quickly say, okay, this or 1 equal 1 and something like that. It needs a password, and you can see that we got access as admin user just by simple basic SQL injection. So that way you are certain now that that was a vulnerability, and that you are certain that that's something that you need to report to the developer. And the same applies for every single vulnerability. Okay. By the way, every time we browse the application, it will prompt with, hey, we detected these new URLs. Do you want to add them to the scope? In this case, we don't want to add it. We are not scanning more. But that's the way it works, right, guys? This is the whole flow. You got the fix recommendation similar to cross-site scripting. Here's gonna give you examples on how to fix a SQL injection. It is exactly the same output that WebInspect and other tools. Okay, and you can go to all those different ones. You can see that the red ones are high, then the mediums orange, and the low, I think those are low, are the let me check here just quickly, guys. I just want to check. Actually, I'm just trying to find where is the rating. All right, here. Okay, yeah, I was trying just to find where they set high, medium, and low. It's not clear right away, but eventually you will see it in the documentation or at the bottom of the window. It puts some labels. Okay, guys. Also, another thing, if you turns out that, let's say, these things were FPs, okay, so you will right click on it, report false positive. They said you can save it, and you will save it encrypted, so that it will store and can be recovered. Okay, close. And let me also remove this other one. I'm just gonna leave actually the directory listing one. Okay, guys, just the directory listing and all the high and medium. Okay, and then that's pretty much it, guys. That's the way it works, the validation. Let's go now to the next step, which is reporting. Okay, guys, so we got the details, we got the findings, and now it's time to prepare the report. So the report, you just click on report here. You will have different different templates. You can have industry standard, you can have regulatory compliance, so that you can have, if you have PCI related compliance, which is related to credit cards, it will have a template, and it will have the checks to explain. And eventually, if it is a good report, it will even say SQL injection is violating this specific control in PCI, for example. And here we can put, like, in my case, I like to put detailed report. I always like to put the request and response, because you need to have evidence of the request and response being sent. Sometimes when you test it, it's vulnerable and the developers change it and do something, and when you go and meet with them, they said, hey man, this is not happening, I don't see the error, so that you have the evidence. I don't put these cookies, filters, comments, failed requests. I just remove them normally. Let's say that that's pretty much it. You just click on save report. Okay, guys, and it will just create a PDF file for you guys with all the findings. Keep in mind that we tag two of them as false positives, the database error and the direct access. So we should have only two findings, right? Instead of these two for database error, one for direct access and two for directory listing, which is 5, we should have only 2 of them, right? So let's see the report, how it reflects those things. The report, by the way, can be properly put in the layout. So in the layout, you can put your own logo here, the title, here, header and footer, even if you want to put it. Here is the report, basic, no big deal. It will tell you a table of content with the links, so let's say general information, we go there, it says, okay, I found 7 high, this is pretty cool. You click add node. To be honest, guys, don't tell anyone, but I don't know if this feature is from IBM or if this is just a PDF feature, but cool feature, honestly. And that's it. When you hover over it, you will have a note. Okay, and then you have the low, which is 5. You remember those 5? Actually, 3 of them were marked as false positives. Let's see if that was reflected. So we have the scan file name, we have the scan started, the template of the policy being used, in this case Windows IIS. Okay, guys, so let's go down. We have all the issues here. If we click on, let's check the ones. We have all the details here. Let's go first with the SQL injection. We see the SQL injection, we see all the technical description, so that the developers can understand how that works. Even they give an example of SQL injection basic stuff that you definitely need to explain to these people. Then comes the directory listing. and then comes, let me go down. Actually, let me go up. I'm just gonna go to the here, right here. Okay, I'm gonna go just to the, we said that we only leave the directory listing. So here it is, directory listing. It says severity low. Here is the score, sorry, and here is all the details. That's the one that we didn't mark as false positive, but let's check the other ones. Direct access. See this direct access, guys. This is one that we mark as false positive, okay? And I don't see any mark that says it is a false positive, even though we mark it. Direct access. So what we need to do then is we need to delete it. And it is exactly the same that we do with Web Inspect. If you mark it as a false positive, it's fine, but it still is gonna be show up in the report. I don't know why, guys. It should not be reported because it's an FP. But anyways, the way you need to do is you need to delete it and you are good to go. And that's basically the report, guys. And that's pretty much it with the 101. So hope you enjoy it, guys, and see you in the next lab. Hey guys, so let's keep adding more cool stuff in our Web Application Defender certification. As you know, we understood the process to prepare and scan using Web Inspect and also using AppScan. Those are some of the best tools in the market nowadays. Very expensive, but those are really good and recommended tools for web application scanner. So we are closing this whole effort with another tool which is also very famous, and it is called Acunetics. So this is the third, and I would say also famous tool in the market since long time ago, probably around 10 years now, probably close to 10 years. So this is the final tool that I'm gonna be showcasing with you guys. The good news is that tool, Acunetics, we have a partnership with them, so you guys will be able to play with the tool in the labs. So that I mean, for other tools like Web Inspect might not be that easy, you know, because of some licensing that we are working on. But for Acunetics, I'm happy to confirm that we will be able to play with the tool. Okay, so let's start going into the tool. So Acunetics used to be a tool, standalone tool, as same as Web Inspect and AppScan some years ago, around 6-7 years ago, but they moved to a cloud-based approach. To be honest, I don't know if they still have the standalone version, but at least this is what we got from them. They gave us an online vulnerability scanner for us. Okay, so I'm just gonna describe how it works and how you guys can use it, right? So first of all, you will need to request a license, of course, from Acunetics. Once you have a license, they will enable you to get access to this specific website, which is called Online Vulnerability Scanner. As usual, you will need to log in with your credentials, and then a very important step is that you will need to verify your account. So the first step before you start trying to do scans is you need to verify your account. Basically, you will go to profile and you will fill out your information, and you will need to provide a valid phone number. Once you provide a valid phone number, you will click on verified. Here is in the green screen, it says account verified here. since we already did it. But basically the way it works is that you will provide your phone number, and then when you click verified, you will receive an automated call where it is going to provide a 4-pin number which you need to enter, and that way you will verify your account. Obviously, as I said, you need to have a license, which is another verification process. So Acunetics has made a lot of effort during the verification process, because since it is something that you can just scan, you can scan a government website, so they want to make sure that you are a valid user. Okay, so once you are verified, there is another step. So we have here different menus. We will see the dashboard in a second. The dashboard is basically showing you the scan results. Let's go to that one quickly. So here in the dashboard, you will have, for example, in this case, the latest scan. Okay, so the latest scan that we did is this one, which has, the graphic with all the type of vulnerabilities identified, the top 10 vulnerabilities in the right side, and when it was completed. Okay, so that's one thing. But you will always have here, the latest scan being done. Then when we go to the launch scan, is the next tab. Launch scan is gonna basically allows you to start running a scan based on a pre-configured targets. In other words, we already have this target ready to scan, so we can always come here and say scan now, or we can schedule a scan whenever you want to run it. But you can always add more targets, and there is where we are going to start right now. So we already have this specific website added, but you will need to add new scan targets. So in order to do that, we come here to scan targets. We say add scan targets, or if you say list scan targets, it will obviously list the current ones. If you say scan target groups, it's actually pretty cool. Let me show you this one before. This one is just basically a DNS request. It's gonna try to find all the specific subdomains for a specific host, and then it will list it there for you. So for example, let's see here. We say new group, CSTT websites. So we can add that group. Okay, so then once we have this group, we can start doing some specific scans based on groups, which means it's basically based on different websites. But that's not the case today, so don't worry about that. I'm just gonna delete it. So let's go to the add scan target. Okay, guys. So here we need to provide a name for the target. Let's say test 1, test 2, a proper description. I don't know, a settlement server, Dakota, whatever. Here you need to put the IP or URL. We are just gonna put a random URL. It doesn't matter. I just wanna add the scan. Okay, so the scan is gonna start adding it, and here is gonna be presented with a second screen. Here, basically there are two things. First, the web scan must be validated. In order to be validated, you need to prove that you own that website. In order to prove it, you need to download a unique verification file, which you can see here. This is just for web scanning. And then you need to click here on download verification file. As you can see, it is just a specific hash that you will need to download. Okay. And then once you download it, let's just click on save. Okay, and let me just open it for you. You can see that internally it just has another hash, which obviously is validated by Acunetics. So once you have that specific verification file, you need to upload it to the root folder of your web application. Once you upload it, you will basically say here verify scan target, and the only thing is going to happen is Acunetics is going to connect to the website, check that file is already there, pull it, check the content, and with that it's going to say, okay, I know that you guys own that website, so good to go. Okay, so that's the verification process. I'm not going to do it, but it's pretty simple. You will have the chance to do it in the labs. That's the first thing. Second thing, Acunetics also offers network scans, which basically, to be honest, I didn't test it. It is out of scope of our certification, but we might play with it in our Network Defender certification. But that one requires a second step of verification. Basically, you will need to provide the email, the password, and then they will follow a second process to validate your identity. Okay, in our case we don't need it, so we have this information here. Okay, so the next step, guys, after we provide the verification, assuming we already did it, is the form verification. These guys, if you remember the previous labs that we created about Web Inspect and App Scan, we always have a web macros, which allow us to be able to record login forms, right? If you need to get access to a specific application that requires authentication based on form-based authentications, you know, when you need to enter a login, username, a password in a HTML form, well, you can use the same as Web Inspect and App Scan web macro. So that web macro is just basically is going to allow you to go to the website and then to record the credentials, so that anytime the application finds that web form, login form, it will authenticate by you automatically. And also, if for some reason you get disconnected from that session, it will connect back again. Okay. In this case, since Acunetics started creating this web-based application, you will need to download that login sequence recorder. Okay, guys. So if you click on here, login sequence recorder, it will prompt you to download this Acunetics client, which is just a login sequencer. I already downloaded it, so I'm gonna show you how we can record the screen in order to prepare the scan to be able to reach authenticated areas. Okay, so we have here the shortcut. I just double click on it, and while it is loading, let me go to our famous now vulnerable OWASP web application. We are using this vulnerable web application just to showcasing all those different scanners, as you might remember. So I'm gonna just go to this specific section here in the login credentials. Here is just a login area. I'm just gonna reach out this one so that we can record our macro. Okay, so I just identified a page which requires credentials to log in. As you can see, if we try to enter, it's gonna say invalid username and password, but we know the password, in this case admin, and the password is password. Okay, and then we are inside. As you can see, these credentials are needed by the web scanner in order to be able to log in properly. So let's do that. So we have here, it opens to Windows. So we have here our login sequence wizard. So we are gonna paste here our page, and then after you paste it, make sure, guys, to click on this arrow. And I'm telling you because it took me some minutes to figure it out, because I didn't know how to start recording it, and it was not loading anything. It's kind of not hard, but not intuitive enough for me, at least. So when you click here, it's just gonna go and load the login page. You can see in the right side, let me just open a little bit. You can see that it will have all the steps we are following, exactly the same as the other solutions. It's exactly the same idea. So here we say admin. When we move to the next input box, you can see that it says, oh, I understood that there is an input with the user admin, then the password. As you can see again, it recorded the password. Then we click on login, and it says, oh, I understood that. You need to navigate here, enter in the user admin, enter in the password, and click on login. After that, guys, in the lower, let me just put it a little bit. This is better, I think. Yeah. Okay, I'm just resizing it. We don't need to have the full screen. So the next step, guys, by the way, sorry I didn't mention it. At the beginning, in the lower left, by default, you can see that the record option is selected. It's by default, and if you unclick it, it won't be recording these whole steps, okay? So just leave it as it is. Then you click on next. The next is gonna allow us to put some restrictions, basically some specific get or post requests that you don't wanna add. I don't see any value, to be honest, in my exercises, so I'm just gonna skip it. Then in the next one is very important one. The next one is gonna try to find any pattern combination that tells the scanner it was successfully logged in. So the scanner, if you remember, is trying to find a way to know when the application is logged in automatically. So it says here that login sequence recorder has successfully identified a pattern to use for detecting session validity. In this case, what it detected, as you can see here, is there is a welcome. So it detected that once you log in properly, it is going to be a welcome.php page, and that page here in the validation pattern says if the status code is 200, which means it is okay, you were able to retrieve the content, then I know that the user has successfully been logged in. This is the way it's gonna check for proper authentication Acunetics. Now, if for some reason, which is also very common, you will, the scanner won't be able to detect a proper pattern, you will need to add it manually. So that's the same for all different scanners. Every other one has its own capabilities to detect it properly, but you can always come here and say, hey, you know what? Pattern found in headers. Probably there is a pattern which is relocation, probably in the headers. Sorry for this one. Okay, there is a pattern in headers. There might be another pattern in the response. You know, you can say, you know what? There is a pattern in the response which says probably welcome admin. You know, I know that this is the content in the response that is gonna tell me that the user has been properly authenticated. Good to go, you know? But in our case, we don't need it, so we just leave it as it is. And we just finally click on finish. It's gonna prompt us to save, obviously, our sequence, login sequence. We say something like, I don't know, OWASP test, and we save it. Okay, guys? Once we save it, let me show you how you can load it into the server. Okay, so once we save it, then we can come here and we can say, hey, I have a login sequence file and I can upload it. Okay, so we just go to it was documents, Acunetics, login sequences, and let me just also take a chance to open this guy. I will return to that window in a second. We say open, and you can see here that our login sequence has been uploaded. We need to click on update, and then our okay, he's obviously saying that we need to verify this. Don't worry about that. We are just showing you how it works. And then we have here our login sequence that we just prepared. And let me show you the content of that login sequence. As you saw while recording, it's just basically a JSON format that describes all the different steps followed by that specific macro. So as you can see, it says navigate, which is an action for Acunetics to know that it needs to take this content and navigate to it. Then takes another one, which is a parameter, input name user, which with the value admin. Okay, and then it says the target, it is an input, which is a form input file, and the type is change. as you can see, there is another one, which is here, input name password, value password, and again, it is in the input form, which is identified as the value number 2. The value number 1 is the user, value number 2 is the password, and then it is also being provided. Finally, the login, which the type is click, which means this login object, if we can define it as it is gonna be a click, and it is also another component of the form. Okay, guys, so it's basically what it is gonna do. And finally, the detection, very important, which is gonna tell, okay, how do I know that it was properly authenticated? So here we are, the welcome admin that we will see in the welcome. So you can see that in the welcome.php, it detected the welcome admin pattern, and that means it is properly authenticated. No restrictions, as we didn't put any, and that's pretty much it, guys. Okay, so we are back to our configuration. There is another option, which is the AccuSensor. It just supported, or at least is just listed here, PHP and .NET. Those are just basically configurations based on the application that we are testing, so that it can be easy for Acunetics to identify vulnerabilities, to improve scans, reduce false positives. Let me just show you how it works. So for example, I choose sensor for PHP, and then let me open it, the content for you guys, so that you know. Here it is. So basically, it is just showing different aspects. For example, here you can see it is configuration based on Acunetics. It has the header. If it is not found, let me just open it a little bit more. It has some control words. So those parameters that you see here, guys, those are control words from Acunetics. So basically, Acunetics is loading this PHP file into the server. You need to place it into the server, and that way Acunetics has a way to communicate with this specific sensor, and that sensor is going to allow Acunetics to identify specific issues inside the box. It's like giving it more information, since it already has access to the environment, and that will also confirm if definitely there is something that it is malicious or not. It's like a backdoor, legit backdoor, which Acunetics is gonna place into the web server. I mean, you need to upload it, and that way is gonna help it to confirm when there are some vulnerabilities identified. Okay, guys, but you don't need to upload it. These SSH credentials, finally, that one is more related to network scans. We don't use it again because it is out for the scope. So we are good to go. We save it. Let's say that we verify the target. So we are good to go. The final step, guys, pretty easy. Is just to go and launch the scan. Okay. If you want to launch the scan, you just come. You have this guy. And you just click on scan now. And that's going to start running. Let me just quickly do it for this guy, because this is not a valid IP actually. So let me just do it for this other guy. Well, no, actually I don't wanna mess with this. Let's just try to see what's wrong. So it's gonna say scan. Oh, I got disconnected. Okay. Ouch. Okay. I think I am already here. Yeah. Okay, so I launched the scan. I didn't do anything. Let me do the scan now. Okay. Excellent. So I click on launch scan now, right? So the first thing is gonna prompt you is the scan configuration. As you remember, it's gonna tell you as usual. Oh. Okay. is not allowing me because it has not been verified. Don't worry, guys, we can pick up our validated one, and we can just click on this guy, and we can actually delete it later. So let's click on the WASP one, actually, not this one. Let's take the WASP. We click on the scan now. This is already verified, so we have our scan properties. So as you saw, I mean, it was not intentional, but it's good to talk about that. So since you didn't verify it, you won't be able to scan, right? So that's very important. So here we have the vulnerability scan. We can define if it is full scan, which means to test all the different vulnerabilities. If you just want only a cross-site request forgery, high risk alerts, which is normally SQL injection, cross-site scripting, local file inclusion, which we teach in our course. SQL injection with password, cross-site scripting. Obviously, no web scan means if you just wanna do a network vulnerability scan. In our case, is not the case, right? We, let's say, put SQL injection. We said no network scan. We don't wanna scan that server. And then we configure the reports. Is obviously, feel free, guys, to play with all those different reports. I like the developer report one because that one is ready to give to the developer, and we can give him all the post, get, request details so that they can understand the vulnerabilities. Okay, that's pretty much it. And then when we click on launch scan, guys, it will basically, oh sorry, we need to say I confirm that I am fully authorized to scan targets shown below, and then we click on scan, launch scan. It says your scan has been queued. You will notify by email when the scan is done. Okay, guys, that's pretty much it. And here is the scan running at this point. It is this one. We can click on it. We can even delete the scan if we don't wanna, it's like a way to cancel it. Okay, guys, and let me show you how it looks like when you receive a scan. So once the scan is done, you will get a message in your email like this one. It says, hey, dear Vali, the scan is ready. You can review the alerts from here, and this is just basically the web page where the scan is ready. You have a quick summary of the time it took, the kind of scan, alerts. Okay, and if you click on it, obviously you will go to the web page and it's gonna load the scan for you. Okay, guys, so that's one option, and you will see right away all the different details: the starting time, end date, the duration, the files being scanned, the directories, all the different information and all the different details that we're gonna see in a second. The other thing I want to show you is you also will get a link to download the report, which is basically the full report that you wanted to configure is going to be downloaded from here. Okay, so I will leave it there. I will talk about that in a second. So here we have the results, guys. Okay, these results, as you might remember, is also going to be shown in the latest scan in the dashboard. Here we can come and it is exactly the same latest scan. If we click on it, we will get access to exactly the same page. You can access it from the email, or it's gonna be in your dashboard, and you can always check it. Here it says that it didn't detect the AccuSensor. As you remember, that AccuSensor, which was the PHP backdoor, we didn't upload it, but that's it was not needed by us. Okay, so here you will have, guys, all the different vulnerabilities identified. every time you click on a specific vulnerability, it is same as the other ones. It's gonna give you a description of about the vulnerability. You know, in this case, what is blind SQL injection? It's gonna show you how it was injected. You know, the description, the okay, URL encoded post input pass was set to this injection, and here are the tests performed, and then it will also show you for sure the HTTP request so that you can replicate it, and the response. In the response, it doesn't show the full response, only the response headers, which I don't like it, to be honest. Another thing that I didn't find here, guys, is we don't have a client to replicate the request. So basically you need to do it manually. You need to go and launch your browser, your Burp or OWASP, Zap, proxies, whatever you want to use, and then you need to replicate it. No big deal, but just something to mention, because in AppScan and WebInspect, they have their own clients to submit the different requests, right? You can have the option to just right click here, for example, and say, hey, submit the request, and right away you can test that specific request against the vulnerable application. In this case, you need to do it manually outside. Up to you. Just giving you the differences. Okay, guys, and here you have the post request, the response headers. Again, you don't have the full response, which might be SQL error messages, we don't know. And we can see actually also that, let me show you here. Here is the script that was tested, of course, so that you know exactly what was the script that it was trying to test. And it is exactly the same process for all the vulnerabilities. Then it is gonna for sure tell you how to fix the vulnerability, the proper normal recommendations that we have described a lot of times too, and same for all the remaining vulnerabilities. Okay, guys, so we're gonna have a really cool lab about blind SQL injection through these kind of findings, so please look forward to it. It's going to be in our Cybersecurity Web Application Defender certification, of course, so that you can know how to test and how to dump all the database and content. How to dump the database and content manually. Of course, you have tools like SQL Map, which we also teach in our certification, but it's always good to know how to do it manually, because if you want to create your own script, you're good to go. Okay, so this is just quick check of those findings. It's not the scope to test them to know if they are true or not, but as you know, you need to confirm and delete if the ones that are false positives. And anyways, you have all the information here. As usual, red color means critical, yellow means kind of high, green means just informational, is not big deal. Okay, guys, so finally, once you are done with this, you can generate the report right here in the right side, as you can see, or you can go to reports, save reports, and in the save report you will have all the reports that were generated before. As you remember, we already run this scan, so we have here our download report. Another thing that I didn't mention, guys, which is very important, is the scan profile. The scan profile, if you remember, when we were trying to run and scan, it just give us the option, and let me do it for you guys again quickly. So we do here launch scan, okay, and then we click on this guy, scan now. You can see here in the web vulnerability scan, right? You have full scan, CSRF, and all those different profiles. However, if you remember, for WebInspect, you had the option to create your own policy. You had the option to even access the policy with all the different tests. And you can always say, hey, I just need cross-site SQL injection. I don't need to deal with PHP nuke. I don't need to deal with WordPress because I don't mind. It's not my target. It's not related to my application. And that way you can speed up dramatically from hours. I'm saying you can reduce the time and scan from hours to minutes. if you prepare a proper policy for your web application. In this case, I don't see a way for you to upload your own policy scanner. Okay, that's also a very important point. Okay, so back to the save report. As you remember, we decided to create a report based on developer view, and then we can always download it from here. It's gonna be in a PDF format. So we already have it here, guys. So I'm just gonna replace it. And when you click on it, it is just gonna open, you know, similar information. You have here your Acunetics website audit, developer report, as you remember, and then you have here all the details: start time, finish time, scan time, profile, responsive true, server banner, you know, and all the details about the high, medium, low, and informational details. Every scanner has its own definition, you know. Web Inspect has critical. Also, I don't see critical here anyways, but at the end, we should be able to recognize it. It lists the external host if the application is connecting to an external host, and you will see, you know, all the alert summary, all the different PHP detected, the CVSS score, which is kind of the standard score that can tell us why this is the score 4.4, for example. It pretends to be a standard way to measure the criticality of the vulnerabilities. It's being used by Acunetics, pretty cool. And you can see here, you know, all the description. It is just high level, but here you can actually see the real content being executed. You can see here the post request, okay, with the content, and then you can see a second one here, but we don't see the request. We don't see the response. We just see the request headers. Might be something configurable. I didn't find it. And as I said, you will need to test it manually if you wanna confirm if it is a vulnerability or not. So that's pretty much it, guys. With this, this is a vulnerability scanner, web-based Acunetics. You will have a chance to play with it. So hope you enjoy it, guys.